The sun had just begun to rise when the quiet neighborhood slowly came to life. Birds hopped along fences, sprinklers clicked on in neatly trimmed yards. Soft morning light stretched across the sidewalks. Inside one small townhouse, a man named Daniel sat on his living room couch, hoping this day would go smoothly. He had been recovering from a recent surgery, and the healing process was taking longer than he expected. Moving around still hurt, and he had strict instructions to avoid unnecessary strain. Because of this, a visiting nurse came by every few days to check his wound, change the dressing, and make sure he was healing properly. Daniel wasn't the type who liked relying on others, so adjusting to this new routine felt strange. Still, he appreciated the help. The visits were usually quick and calm, and the nurse who came, someone gentle, patient, and good at explaining things, always made him feel at ease. He wasn't expecting any trouble. As far as he knew, it would be another simple morning. Another checkup, another step toward recovery. Outside, the neighborhood was part of a homeowners association known for rules that covered everything from trash bin placement to the type of flowers allowed in front yards. Most residents followed the rules without much fuss, but one neighbor took things far more seriously than everyone else. Her name was Linda, and she treated the HOA guidelines like they were law. People often joke that she seemed to think she ran the entire community. She monitored every parking spot, every guest, every delivery truck, every garden decoration, and every dog walker. It wasn't unusual to see her standing by her window taking notes or filming small things she felt were suspicious, even though Daniel mostly kept to himself. He had heard stories about her. A neighbor's nephew once parked slightly crooked, and she reported it. Another neighbor placed 2 small potted plants on their porch, and she left a written warning. It wasn't that she wanted to keep the neighborhood nice. Everyone appreciated that it was that she took every inch situation to an extreme. On this particular morning, the visiting nurse named Noelle was driving down the street toward Daniel's home. Her shift had started early, but she didn't mind. She liked helping people, and she especially enjoyed working with patients who were recovering at home. Noelle parked in a visitor's spot just a few doors down from Daniel's townhouse. She grabbed her neatly organized medical bag, double-checked Daniel's address, and started walking toward his home. Noelle didn't know anything about the neighborhood, drama, or the self-appointed rule enforcer who watched visitors like a hawk. Her only focus was getting to the appointment on time and making sure Daniel was comfortable. Unfortunately, the moment her car door closed, a pair of blinds in a nearby window snapped open. Behind the glass, Linda had noticed an unfamiliar vehicle in the visitor parking area. She narrowed her eyes, wondering who it belonged to. Delivery drivers usually pulled in quickly and left just as fast. But this car wasn't marked, and the person stepping out wasn't holding any packages. To Linda, that meant one thing: a stranger. She didn't like strangers. While Noelle walked along the sidewalk, taking a moment to enjoy the cool morning air, Linda stepped out of her front door with the urgency of someone who believed she had an important mission. She crossed her arms tightly and waited in the middle of the walkway, right between Noelle and the direction she needed to go. Noelle approached with her usual friendly smile, not expecting anything unusual. But as she got closer, she noticed the tense posture and serious expression on the woman's face. "Good morning," Noelle said politely. Linda didn't return the smile. "Can I help you?" she asked sharply. Her tone wasn't curious. It was confrontational, like she was already suspicious. Noelle stayed calm. She had dealt with difficult personalities before, though usually in medical settings, not out on the sidewalk. "I'm just here for a home care appointment," she explained kindly. Linda's eyes scanned Noelle's medical bag, then her badge. Instead of being reassured, she seemed even more doubtful. "Which house?" Linda asked. As though she had the authority to approve or deny the answer, Noelle wasn't comfortable sharing a patient's details with a stranger. "I'm here for someone who lives in this area," she said gently. "He's expecting me." "That's not good enough," Linda replied immediately. "I don't recognize your car. And you can't just walk around the neighborhood without telling someone. There are procedures here." Noelle blinked in confusion. Procedures. She had visited dozens of neighborhoods, and none of them required visitors to pass a personal interview in the middle of the road. "I assure you, everything is okay," she said softly. "I'm just trying to get to my patient so I can help him start his day." But Linda stepped forward, blocking her path more firmly. "You can't go wandering around until I know exactly where you're going and why. We've had issues in this community before. Suspicious people pretending to be something they're not." Noelle kept her tone calm, though she was starting to feel uneasy. "Ma'am, I understand you're trying to look out for the neighborhood, but I need to get to my patient. He's recovering from surgery." Instead of calming down, Linda's suspicions seemed to grow. "Show me proof." "I've shown you my badge," Noelle reminded her, holding it up again. Linda shook her head. "Anyone can make a badge," Noelle sighed softly. She didn't want to cause a scene, and she certainly didn't want to stress Daniel. She glanced toward his home, still a few houses away. If she could just get past this one overly involved neighbor, everything would be fine. Meanwhile, inside his townhouse, Daniel looked at the time. Noelle usually knocked right on schedule. When she hadn't arrived yet, he figured traffic must be slow. But after a few more minutes, curiosity made him peek out the window. That was when he spotted Noelle and Linda standing on the sidewalk. Daniel frowned. He could tell something wasn't right. Noelle looked uncomfortable, and Linda's body language screamed confrontation. Daniel debated going outside immediately, but he wasn't supposed to move around too much. Still, he didn't like the idea of Noelle dealing with problems just for trying to help him. Outside, Noelle tried one more time to keep things simple. "I don't want any trouble," she said quietly. "I'm just doing my job. If you're worried, maybe you can call the homeowner. He knows I'm coming." "Oh, I'm sure he does," Linda replied sarcastically. "People say anything when they're trying to get access to private homes." Gah! Noelle's stomach tightened a little. She wasn't used to strangers accusing her of bad intentions. She had become a nurse to help people, not to be interrogated on the sidewalk. "Please step aside," Noelle said gently. "I don't want to be late. This is important." But instead of stepping aside, Linda planted her feet even more firmly and drew in a breath, like she was preparing for a speech. "No one walks around this neighborhood without clearance," she declared, as if the morning needed more tension. Another resident, walking their dog, slowed down to watch the interaction. A couple across the street paused, watering their garden. Even though nothing dramatic was happening, the neighborhood had a habit of noticing everything. Noelle could feel the eyes on her. She wished more than anything that she could just finish her job in peace. But with Linda refusing to move, all she could do was stand there and hope the situation didn't get worse. Back inside, Daniel reached for his phone. Something told him he might need it. And that was how the trouble first began. A quiet morning that should have been simple. It's peaceful and routine. The tension on the sidewalk was getting thicker by the second, and Noelle could feel it sitting heavy in her chest. She had dealt with stressed families, anxious patients, even the occasional rude comment from a stranger in a hospital hallway, but she had never been blocked from doing her job in a quiet neighborhood during a simple morning visit. She kept reminding herself to stay calm. That was the first rule in her line of work. Stay calm, even when the situation around you, Linda, however, seemed determined to do the exact opposite. Instead of calming down, she was growing more confident in her self-assigned authority. She looked Noelle up and down, as if searching for something to criticize. The longer she looked, the more intense her expression became, like she was building a case in her head. "You say you're a nurse?" Linda said with a sharp tone. "But anyone can carry a bag like that? Anyone can print a badge. We've had people try to get into houses before. I'm not letting you walk up to someone's door until I know exactly who you are and why you're here." Noelle felt her heartbeat quicken, not out of fear, but out of frustration. She had shown her badge, her ID, and her medical bag clearly held supplies no one would carry around for fun. She didn't want to argue, but she also couldn't leave. Daniel needed care. She needed to complete her visit. "I understand your concern," Noelle said, keeping her voice steady, "but I need to get to my patient. He's waiting for me. I'm here to help him, nothing else." Linda tapped her foot impatiently. "If he's expecting someone, then he should have told the HOA. That's how we keep things organized around here." Noelle blinked. She had never heard of a neighborhood where medical professionals had to check in with the homeowners association. It sounded ridiculous, and even if such a rule existed, it didn't give Linda the right to block her path. "Ma'am, please," Noelle said gently. "If you're unsure, you can call the HOA or call the homeowner himself. But I really need to go inside." Linda crossed her arms tightly. "No, you're not going anywhere until I verify who you are." Noelle opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, another voice cut into the air. "What's going on here?" It was a man walking his dog, someone who seemed to live a few houses down. He looked from Linda to Noelle with a confused expression. "This woman is trying to enter the neighborhood without permission," Linda announced loudly. Pointing at Noelle as though she had caught a criminal, the man frowned. "It's a public neighborhood. Visitors come all the time." "Not without clearance," Linda insisted. The man looked even more confused. "That's not a thing." "Stay out of this," Linda snapped, waving him off like he was an annoying insect. Noelle saw the man hesitate, then choose to keep walking. She didn't blame him. Most people didn't want to get involved in neighborhood drama. Noelle didn't want to be part of it either. Meanwhile, Daniel was still watching from his window. He had been debating whether to step outside and intervene. He didn't want to risk moving too much, but he also didn't want Noelle to be stuck out there any longer. The situation didn't look like it would resolve itself. He took a slow breath, leaned heavily on the doorframe for support, and opened his front door. "Noelle," he called out. She turned immediately, relieved to hear his voice. "I'm coming," Noelle said, trying to walk forward, but once again, Linda shifted to block the path, raising her hand as if that alone gave her some kind of official power. "You're not going anywhere," Linda barked. "If he really knows you, he can come out and tell me." Daniel let out a long breath of disbelief. He had heard plenty about Linda from neighbors, but he never expected her to be this intense. "I do know her," Daniel called out, stepping onto his porch. "She's my visiting nurse. Please let her through." Linda turned toward him. "Are you sure? People can pretend to be medical workers. You should be more careful. This is how scams happen." Daniel couldn't believe what he was hearing. He leaned more heavily against the porch column. "She's been coming for days. I recognize her. I know her. She's here to help me." But Linda wasn't budging. She still looked suspicious, as if Daniel's word wasn't enough. "If she's really your nurse, where's her paperwork?" Linda demanded. "I have it," Noelle replied, "but it contains private health information for the patient. I can't show it to a stranger." "A stranger?" Linda gasped, offended. "I live here." "That doesn't make you part of his medical care team," Noelle said calmly. Linda opened her mouth to snap back, but Daniel interrupted before she could. "This is ridiculous," he said, wincing from the effort of raising his voice. "You don't have the right to stop her. Please, just let her through." Linda shook her head stubbornly. "Not until I get confirmation from the HOA." Daniel rubbed his forehead in frustration. "It's 7 in the morning. No one from the HOA is awake." "That's not my problem," Linda replied coldly. Noelle took in a slow breath. She needed to choose her words carefully. She didn't want to escalate things. "I understand you want to protect your neighborhood, but I have a scheduled appointment, and he needs medical care. I'm not asking for trouble, just room to pass." "You'll get that when I say so," Linda snapped. Noelle's heart sank. She didn't want to push past her. She didn't want to argue, but she couldn't stand there forever. Every minute wasted on this argument was another minute Daniel was stuck waiting. A small crowd had started forming. A couple of neighbors watering their plants had stopped to watch. A jogger slowed down as they passed. People could sense something was off. The tension was almost visible. One neighbor, a woman in a light hoodie, walked closer and whispered quietly to Noelle, "Don't take it personally. She does this to everyone, even delivery drivers." Noelle nodded gratefully, but that didn't help her move forward. She tried again. "Please step aside," No, Linda said firmly. Daniel called out, "Linda, this is going too far." "Too far?" she repeated, as if insulted. "I'm the only one doing what needs to be done around here. If I don't keep an eye on things, who will?" Noelle couldn't help but finally say, "That's not your responsibility, ma'am." Linda stiffened. It absolutely is. I'm responsible for keeping this neighborhood safe. And I won't let some stranger walk around just because they say they have an appointment. Noelle held the strap of her medical bag a little tighter, trying again to stay patient. I'm not just saying it. I'm here because I'm supposed to be here. And I'm saying you're not going anywhere until I confirm that. Noelle took a small step forward. Linda stepped forward. Too, it was like an invisible line was drawn between them, and neither was moving. Noelle's voice was still calm but firmer now. Please let me go to my patient, Linda repeated. Daniel tried to step off the porch, but his legs shook, and he grabbed the railing. Stop, Noelle said quickly. Don't move. You'll hurt yourself. He stayed still, breathing hard, frustrated and helpless. This wasn't just a simple argument anymore. This was becoming a dangerous barrier to someone receiving care. A few neighbors exchanged worried looks. One quietly whispered, "Should we call someone?" Another said, "This is getting out of hand." But before anyone could act, Linda raised her voice. "If you're really his nurse, prove it right now." Noelle felt her patience finally reach a limit. "I have nothing to prove to you," she said softly, but clearly. "My responsibility is to my patient, not to your personal rules." Linda's face darkened. "Then you're not going anywhere," she said. Noelle tried again to move around her. Linda moved again to block her. "Noelle, step to the other side." Linda mirrored her. The tension was so thick that even the neighbors watching held their breath. "Please don't do this," Noelle said. "This isn't helping anyone. It's helping the neighborhood." Linda replied sharply. Another neighbor called out, "Linda, let her go. She's clearly working." Linda didn't turn around. "Stay out of it," she snapped. Then something happened that made the situation shift from irritating to overwhelming. Linda reached out and grabbed the strap of Noelle's medical bag. It wasn't violent. It wasn't forceful. But it was enough to freeze everything. Noelle's breath caught in her throat. She gently pulled the strap back. Stepping away, "Please don't touch me," she said quietly. "I'll touch whatever I need to if it means protecting this neighborhood," Linda said. "No," Noelle replied a bit more firmly. "That's not okay." Daniel, still struggling to stay upright on the porch, shouted. Linda, "Stop!" Neighbors gasped. Someone whispered, "Oh no." It was no longer a simple disagreement. It was crossing a line. Noelle knew she had to stay professional. She steadied her voice. "I'm calling my agency," she said. "You do that?" Linda replied, lifting her chin. "I'll call the HOA. I'll call the police," Daniel said from his porch. For the first time, Linda turned slightly shocked. "Why would you call the police?" "I'm the one protecting the neighborhood." "You're interfering with medical care," Daniel said sharply. Linda looked offended again. "I'm not interfering. I'm making sure this woman is who she says she is." "She is," Daniel insisted. More neighbors stepped a little closer, murmuring among themselves. A couple shook their heads, clearly tired of Linda's behavior. Noelle took a deep breath, pulling her phone from her pocket while holding her medical bag tightly. She began dialing her agency. Linda crossed her arms again and muttered, "I'm not the bad guy here. I'm the only one doing what needs to be done." But no one around her looked like they agreed. In that moment, in that ordinary morning, the situation had shifted into something serious enough that even Linda couldn't pretend it was harmless. Daniel's voice was faint but steady as he repeated, "I'm calling for help." And that was the moment the entire neighborhood realized this wasn't just another one of Linda's dramatic confrontations. It was something much bigger. Something that would not end the way she expected. The air in the neighborhood felt strange. It's almost heavy, like the quiet before a summer storm. Noelle stood still with her phone in her hand, trying to steady her breathing. She had called her agency, letting them know she was being stopped from reaching her patient. They were shocked, confused, and concerned. They told her to stay calm and not engage in anything that might make the situation worse. It wasn't the kind of advice she ever imagined needing just to walk to someone's front door. Across the small stretch of sidewalk, Linda stood with her arms crossed, still guarding the path as if she owned it. She kept talking under her breath, muttering things about safety, rules, strangers, and how no one else seemed to take responsibility like she did. She acted like she was the only person keeping the entire neighborhood from falling apart. Daniel, still on his porch, leaned against the railing for support. He looked exhausted already, and the visit hadn't even begun yet. He hated feeling helpless, but the pain from his surgery made it nearly impossible to walk far or stand for long. He couldn't get to Noel, not without putting himself at risk. A few neighbors stayed nearby, clearly uncomfortable. They had seen Linda behave dramatically before, but this was different. This wasn't about a misplaced trash bin or someone's lawn being too tall. This was about someone stopping a patient from getting the medical care he needed. Everyone could sense it. Something was very wrong. Noelle lowered her phone slowly, feeling the weight of the situation. Her agency said they were documenting everything and might need to speak with authorities. She didn't like the sound of that. She wasn't trying to start a legal problem. She had only wanted to help her patient. Daniel finally spoke again, his voice strained. "Noelle, please try to come. I really need you." Noelle met his eyes, and the look on his face made her heart tighten. He looked pale, he looked tired, he looked like someone who simply wanted a normal morning and a bit of help. "I'm trying," she said softly. "I'll be there soon." Linda snapped her head toward Daniel. "You need to stay inside. You shouldn't be out here yelling like that. You're recovering. And you're welcome, by the way, for keeping you safe from suspicious people." Daniel let out a breath of disbelief. "Safe? You're stopping my nurse from helping me." Linda shook her head with complete certainty. "I'm stopping someone who hasn't proven who they are from entering your home." "She has proven it," Daniel said. "She's shown her badge." "No one verifies badges," Linda replied. "Anyone could make one on a computer. There are entire websites about fake IDs. I read about it." Noelle gently stepped forward again, keeping her movements soft, showing no sign of aggression or impatience. "I've done everything I can to reassure you," she said. "But I need to get to my patient now." It's time she didn't try to go around Linda, not yet. She simply stood there, waiting for a moment of reason, but reason didn't come. "I'm not moving," Linda said, as if daring her. Something inside Noelle shifted. She felt a mix of emotions: frustration, sadness, disbelief, and a sense of responsibility that weighed heavily on her. She didn't want conflict. She didn't want an argument. But she had a job to do. A patient depending on her. Very gently, she said, "Ma'am." "Please." "No," Linda said again, louder. Some neighbors whispered behind them. "Why is she doing this?" one asked. "She doesn't even know the nurse," another whispered. "She just likes controlling everything," someone else added. Linda either didn't hear them or didn't care. The silence stretched long, tense, uncomfortable. Then, without warning, Linda stepped forward again, not forcefully, but close enough that Noelle had to take a half step back. "You're not getting past me," Linda said. "Not until I get answers." Noelle's voice wavered slightly. Not with fear, but with the emotional exhaustion of trying so hard to reason with someone who didn't want to be reasoned with. "What answers do you need?" she asked calmly. "Why you didn't call ahead to the HOA, Linda said. "Why you think you can just park here without permission? Why you won't show me proof that you're who you say you are? Why you think you can talk to me like I'm nobody?" Noelle blinked in surprise. "I never said you were nobody. You implied it," Linda snapped. "I didn't," Noelle replied softly. "Yes, you did. You all do. Everyone acts like I'm some sort of problem in this neighborhood, but I'm the only one who keeps it running correctly." The outburst made the neighbors flinch. Some exchanged glances that said we all knew she was intense. But this is too much. Daniel tried again to step off the porch, but couldn't move more than a couple of steps before needing to hold on to the railing again. "Let her help me. I'm not feeling well." Noelle immediately turned her head toward him with concern. "Please don't push yourself," she said. "I'll be there soon." "We'll see about that," Linda muttered. The tension spiked so sharply that even the wind seemed to pause. Noelle knew she had to do something. But she also knew she couldn't touch Linda or try to shove past her, not only because it would escalate things, but because she didn't want to cross any lines, especially as a medical professional. She had to stay calm, stay controlled, stay aware. She tried a different method. "If you're that worried," Noelle said gently, "you can stand nearby while I go in. You don't need to block me, you can watch. can make sure everything is safe. I'm okay with that if it helps." Some neighbors nodded. That seemed like a fair compromise, but Linda wasn't interested in compromise. "I don't care about watching," she snapped. "I care about controlling who goes where and you're not cleared." "Cleared by who?" a neighbor finally asked, unable to stay quiet. "By the HOA." Linda shouted. Someone else muttered. "The HOA barely cares about half the things she claims they do." Linda turned sharply. "I heard that." The neighbor shrugged. "Good." Noelle closed her eyes for a moment, trying to gather herself. She didn't want to cry out of stress or frustration. She didn't want to let the situation overwhelm her. She had to focus. Her patient needed her. She opened her eyes again and said calmly, "I'm going to walk to him. Please don't stop me." She took a step, and Linda moved right in front of her. Noelle stepped slightly to the side. Linda mirrored her again. It was like a silent standoff, one that seemed both ridiculous and deeply frustrating. The neighbors watched, frozen. Then Daniel swayed slightly on the porch, catching himself on the railing. His face tightened as if another wave of pain hit him. "Noelle," said faintly. That did it. Noelle stepped forward again, more firmly this time. Not aggressive, never aggressive, but determined, her face filled with steady focus. Linda stepped toward her too, and before Noelle could react, Linda grabbed the strap of her bag again. Not hard, not violently, but she grabbed it. Noelle froze. Everyone froze. It was a moment so heavy that the air felt thick. "Let go," Noelle said quietly. "No," Linda said. "You need to let go," Noelle repeated, still calm. "You're not getting past me," Linda said loudly. Neighbors gasped. Some whispered, "She can't do that." A jogger stopped on the sidewalk a few feet away, staring. Even Daniel looked stunned. "Linda," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Stop." Her hand stayed on the strap. Noelle could feel her heart pounding. She wasn't hurt, not physically, but emotionally. The moment felt huge. She felt violated, not in a harmful way, but in a way that crossed a boundary no professional should have to face. She took a breath. "Please let go." Linda hesitated. Then finally, she released her grip, but instead of stepping back, she moved into Noelle's space again, almost nose tunes. "You're not fooling me," Linda said. "You're not going inside until I say so." Noelle stepped back, not wanting conflict, her voice just above a whisper. "You can't do this." "I can," Linda insisted. And I am." "No, you can't," Daniel called out again, his voice weaker. "You're stopping something important." Linda turned and snapped, "You need to calm down. You're making it worse." "No," Daniel said, trying to stay steady. "You're making it worse." The neighbors murmured again. Someone said, "This has gone too far." Someone else whispered, "She can't keep doing this." But Linda seemed to be the only one who thought she was doing the right thing. Noelle took out her phone. She didn't dial yet, but she held it visibly. "I'm calling for help," she said softly. "For what?" Linda asked, sounding genuinely confused. "For this," Noelle replied. "I can't let this continue." "You're stopping me from providing care," Linda scoffed. "It's my neighborhood. I'm doing what's best." Noelle looked at her in disbelief, but she didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply inhaled, exhaled, and dialed. She walked a few steps backward, toward Daniel yet, but far enough from Linda to have a safe distance. Her fingers shook slightly. She hated having to do this, but she had been pushed too far. The call connected. Neighbors leaned closer, listening. "Yes," Noelle said softly into the phone. "I need assistance. I'm trying to provide home health care to a patient, but someone is blocking me from entering the property." "No, I haven't touched her. She's preventing me from doing my job." "Yes, I'll stay where I am." Linda's eyes widened. "What are you doing? Why would you call anyone?" "I'm helping." Noelle didn't respond to her. She kept her attention on the call. The neighbors finally understood the seriousness of everything. They weren't watching one of Linda's dramatic scenes anymore. They were watching something that could bring real consequences. Daniel sat down slowly on the porch step, feeling drained. Noelle ended the call softly and sat on a low brick ledge nearby. Her hands rested in her lap, and her medical bag sat beside her. She wasn't running away. She wasn't fighting. She was simply keeping her distance and waiting for help. Linda paced nearby, muttering angrily, "I can't believe this. I'm being treated like the problem when I'm the one helping." But no one replied. No one agreed. No one supported her. The neighborhood had fallen silent. Finally, the distant sound of sirens began to echo faintly soft at first, then growing closer. Noelle closed her eyes for a moment, letting out a slow breath. She never imagined a simple morning visit could turn into something like this. And Linda, for the first time since the whole situation began, stood still, not with pride, not with authority, but with uncertainty. Because, deep down, somewhere under all the stubbornness, she must have realized things were about to change. In a way she didn't expect, the morning felt tense. From the moment it began, even though no one said it out loud. Inside the house, the quiet felt heavier than usual. The man sat on the edge of his couch, his phone still in hand from when he had tried calling again. He had hoped the nurse would make it to the door without another confrontation. But after everything that had happened the last time, he already feared the worst. He knew the neighborhood was usually calm. But ever since the trouble with the woman who always seemed to be watching from her window, things felt different. He tried to distract himself by looking around the living room. A stack of papers lay on the table, appointment notes, follow-up care instructions, reminders from the clinic. Normally he liked keeping things tidy, but even the small mess didn't bother him the way the situation outside did. He kept glancing at the clock, wishing time would move faster and slower at the same time. Faster so the nurse could come and go safely, slower so nothing else would go wrong. When he finally heard the faint sound of a car slowing near the front of the house, he let out a nervous breath. He knew it had to be the nurse. She always drove carefully, always parked quietly, and always walked up with the same calm way of carrying herself. But today, as soon as he heard the tires crunch against the gravel, he sensed something was off. He walked to the window and peeked through the blinds. The nurse stepped out of her car, holding her usual medical bag. Her movements were steady, but slightly cautious, as if she already expected trouble. And unfortunately, her worry wasn't misplaced. Just across the street, the familiar figure appeared, arms crossed, eyes fixed directly on the nurse. The same woman who had interfered before. The woman who claimed she was protecting the neighborhood, even when no one asked her to. She stood at the end of her driveway, almost as if she had been waiting all morning. The man felt his stomach tighten. He whispered to himself, "Please, just let her walk inside." But it was clear that wouldn't happen. The nurse began walking up the path to the house, doing her best to ignore the stare she felt on her. She wasn't someone who liked conflict, but she also wasn't afraid to do her job. She took a calming breath and kept moving. Then she heard footsteps. The woman marched toward her again, this time faster, as if she was determined not to let the nurse pass. Her voice rose sharply, echoing across the quiet street. "Hey, you again? I told you before, you're not allowed here." The nurse slowed her steps but didn't stop completely. She hoped staying calm would help avoid another argument. "Ma'am, I'm here for a scheduled medical visit," she said gently. "There's no issue. He's expecting me." But the woman stepped right in front of her, blocking her way with no hesitation. "He doesn't need you. I already told you the last time. You're not coming onto this property again. Not while I'm here watching what's going on in this neighborhood." The nurse held her bag tighter. The sun felt hotter than usual, and the air felt heavy with tension. She tried to step slightly to the side, but the woman mirrored her, still blocking her path. Inside the house, the man had already moved toward the door, sensing the argument rising again. He opened the door a little, hoping the woman would stop if she saw him clearly, but she was too focused on the nurse to notice. "I really need to get inside," the nurse said, keeping her voice low. "This is important. You don't get to decide what's important." The woman snapped. "I live here. I know what's going on. This neighborhood has rules, and we can't just let strangers come and go." The nurse stayed still, not wanting to escalate the situation. "I've shown you my identification before," she said softly. "You know I work for a medical agency," the woman cut her off. "I don't care what papers you have. For all I know, you printed those at home." The man stepped out onto the porch, raising his voice slightly so they could both hear him. "Please let her through," he said. "She's here to help me. I need the visit." But the woman didn't even look at him at first. She kept her eyes locked on the nurse, as if she was trying to stare her down. "This doesn't concern you," she said sharply to him. "It absolutely concerns me," he replied, taking a careful step forward. "She's here because of my medical situation. You can't stop her." The woman finally turned toward him, her expression full of disbelief. "You're being manipulated," she said confidently. "Some people pretend to be medical workers to get inside houses. I've seen those stories online. I'm not going to let that happen here." The man felt a mix of frustration and exhaustion. He had dealt with his medical issues long enough, and the last thing he needed was someone standing between him and the care he depended on. "She's not pretending," he said firmly. "I've had multiple visits. She has documents. Please, don't make this harder than it already is." But the woman only grew more stubborn. "You're too trusting. Someone has to look out for the residents here, and clearly it has to be me." The nurse tried again to stay calm, though she could feel her pulse racing. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to do my job and then leave." "It's not happening," the woman said, stepping even closer. The nurse stepped back instinctively, keeping a respectful distance. But the woman only advanced further. "Stop following me," the nurse said softly. "I'm not the one causing the problem," the woman snapped back. "You are." The man took another step off the porch. His voice was louder now, trying to cut through the rising tension. "That's enough. I'm calling for help if you don't move out of the way." "You go ahead and call," the woman said. "I'm doing what the HOA should be doing." She turned to the nurse again. "You're not walking past me. I'll stand here all day if I have to." The nurse felt her throat tighten. She didn't want conflict, didn't want to raise her voice or make the situation worse. But she also knew she couldn't leave without doing what she came to do. The man reached for his phone again. But the woman stepped closer to the nurse, speaking in a low, sharp tone. "If you try to push past me, we're going to have a problem." The nurse swallowed hard. "Ma'am, please. I'm asking you politely. Let me inside so I can help him." But the woman shook her head firmly. "I don't trust you. And if I don't trust you, you're not going anywhere near that house." The man had heard enough. He dialed emergency services and started speaking, explaining the situation as clearly as he could. He didn't want to exaggerate. He just wanted help. The woman noticed him on the phone and threw her hands up. Double quotes, "Oh, so now you're calling the police on me." She said, "Fine, let them come. I'll explain everything. I'm the one trying to keep this place safe." The nurse stood still, her bag resting against her leg, her breath shaking slightly. She didn't want to look scared, but she felt the weight of the moment pressing against her chest. When the call ended, the man stepped closer to the nurse, standing beside her, quietly showing his support. "It's going to be okay," he said softly. "Just stay near me." The woman rolled her eyes dramatically but stayed exactly where she was, continuing to block the walkway. She looked like someone convinced she was doing the right thing, even while ignoring every sign that she'd in minutes. Passed slowly. Every small sound felt louder, the rustle of leaves, the distant noise of a passing car, the hum of wind through the trees. No one said anything at first. The tension simply hung in the air, stretching the moment longer and longer. Then finally, the faint sound of a siren approached. The woman straightened her posture proudly, as if she had been waiting for this moment to prove her point. The nurse, however, felt her heartbeat quicken again. She didn't want trouble, she just wanted to finish her job. When the patrol car arrived, officers stepped out calmly, observing the situation before approaching. They walked toward the group with steady, composed movements. "Ready to sort things out?" The man stepped forward to speak, but the woman raised her voice first. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she said quickly. "This person is trying to get into homes pretending to be a nurse." The nurse closed her eyes briefly. Gathering her composure, the man shook his head, ready to tell the truth. and the officers began asking their questions, preparing to unravel everything that had led to this moment. The street felt strangely quiet after the officers stepped in and separated everyone. The man stood beside the nurse, relieved that someone finally arrived who could put an end to the tension that had been growing for far too long. The nurse tried to keep her expression calm, though her hands still trembled slightly from the stress of the confrontation. She held her medical bag against her chest, as if grounding herself, so she wouldn't lose her composure. One of the officers led the woman a few steps away, giving enough space so she wouldn't interrupt while the situation was handled properly. She appeared annoyed, almost offended that anyone would question her version of events. Her arms were crossed tightly, and she kept shaking her head, as if she couldn't believe she was being treated like someone who had done something wrong. The man took a slow breath, trying to ease the weight on his shoulders. He looked at the nurse apologetically. "I'm really sorry you had to deal with all of this again," he said quietly. She offered a small, tired smile. "It's not your fault. Some situations just get out of hand when people misunderstand things." Another officer approached them and asked gentle but clear questions how long the nurse had been providing care, what the woman had done to stop her, whether anything physical had happened. The nurse explained everything carefully, keeping her voice steady. She didn't want to exaggerate or make the woman seem worse than she was, but she also wanted to be truthful. Honesty was the only way to resolve the situation. The man confirmed her statements, adding details that showed how long the visits had been going on and how necessary they were for his recovery. He explained how stressful it had been having someone constantly interfere with something so simple and important as medical care. The officers listened patiently, taking notes. Their calm manner made the man feel safer than he had felt in days. Meanwhile, the woman kept trying to explain her side, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. She insisted she had only been trying to protect the neighborhood, and that she didn't trust strangers walking around with bags. She claimed she had seen warnings online about scams, and that she wasn't going to let something happen under her watch, but her explanation didn't line up with the details the officers were gathering. Eventually, one of the officers approached her again. He asked her to step aside and talk with him more privately, away from the others. She followed, though her posture stayed stiff and defensive. She continued talking rapidly, hoping to convince the officer she had been right all along. The man watched from a distance. He couldn't hear everything she was saying, but from her gestures and expressions, he could tell she wasn't backing down. She looked frustrated, as if she were the one being wronged. The nurse stood next to him, focusing on breathing normally again. She had handled difficult situations before, but this was different. She wasn't dealing with a medical emergency. She was dealing with someone who simply refused to let her do her job. After several long minutes, the officer leading the conversation with the woman finally seemed to reach a point where he couldn't overlook what had happened. His tone grew firmer, though still professional. The woman's expression changed slowly from confident to confused, then to irritated. She started raising her voice again, but the officer stayed calm. The man couldn't hear the exact words, but he could tell the officer was explaining the seriousness of interfering with someone's medical care. The woman's face grew redder with each sentence he said. When the officer finally stepped aside to speak with his colleagues, the woman stood alone for a moment, her eyes darting between the nurse and the man, as if she expected them to back her up somehow. But neither of them looked her way. The officers regrouped privately, discussing the details. The man could only imagine what they were saying, but judging by their expressions, the situation wasn't being treated lightly. When they returned, one officer approached the man and the nurse. "Thank you both for being patient," he said. "We've gotten a full picture of what happened today and during the previous visit." "Ah!" The man nodded anxiously, while the nurse stood quiet, hands folded. "We're going to address the situation properly," the officer continued. "She prevented access to essential medical care, which is something we have to take seriously." Hearing those words made the man feel like someone finally understood what he had been going through. It wasn't just a case of a nosy neighbor anymore. This was a problem that had real consequences. The officer then walked back toward the woman. The man and nurse watched as he explained the decision. The woman's reaction was immediate. She threw her hands up and started arguing again, louder than before. Her voice carried across the quiet street. "You can't do this. I was doing the right thing. I was protecting people," she said, but the officer didn't argue with her. He simply repeated what he had told her earlier. Keeping his tone calm but firm, the woman continued protesting, but the officers remained patient, giving her space to express herself without letting her take control of the situation. Finally, after a long, tense moment, the officers calmly guided her toward their vehicle. She looked shocked, as if the idea of being held responsible had never crossed her mind. Even then, she kept talking, explaining, insisting, claiming she was misunderstood, but the officers continued their gentle, steady movement. The man and nurse stood together, watching quietly. Neither of them took joy in seeing her taken away. They didn't want punishment, they just wanted peace. They wanted the situation to be understood for what it was. Eventually, the officers returned to the pair after ensuring the woman would be handled carefully and respectfully. "We've taken the appropriate steps," one officer said. "We'll document everything. You'll likely be contacted for statements later. For now, things should be calmer." The nurse nodded. "Thank you for helping," she said softly. The man added, "I appreciate you coming so quickly." The officers gave a reassuring nod. "If anything else comes up, don't hesitate to call. Your safety and access to care matters." With that, the officers walked back to their vehicle, leaving the man and the nurse standing in the sunlight, finally breathing without tension. When the street returned to its normal quiet, the man turned to the nurse. "Are you all right?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "I think so. Just a little shaken." "I don't blame you," he said. "That was a lot. I'm sorry she treated you that way. You didn't deserve any of it." She gave a small, tired smile. "I'm just glad it's being taken care of." They both glanced toward the house, grateful for the chance to finally proceed with the visit. "Let's go inside," the man said gently. "You've waited long enough. And I really do need the care." The nurse nodded. "Of course. Let's finish what we came to do." Inside the house, the atmosphere felt entirely different from before. The tension had eased, replaced with a sense of relief. The nurse set her bag down and began preparing the supplies she needed. The man settled into a chair, feeling more at ease than he had in days. As she worked, he didn't talk much at first. He simply enjoyed the quiet and the feeling of safety. The nurse, too, seemed grateful for the calm. After several minutes, he finally spoke. "You've been incredibly patient through all this," he said. "I don't know how you handle situations like that so well." The nurse chuckled softly. "Experience teaches you a lot. But this one was definitely more intense than usual." Well, he said, "I'm glad you didn't walk away. I really needed your help today." "I wasn't going to leave unless I absolutely had to," she replied warmly. "My job is to make sure you're taken care of." The man felt grateful not just because she helped him medically, but because she stayed strong in a difficult situation. The visit continued smoothly, and as the nurse worked, she explained the next steps in his recovery, reminding him of the importance of rest and consistency. When she finished, she packed her supplies and stood up. "I'll be back for the next scheduled visit," she said. "And hopefully things will be quiet next time." He smiled. "I hope so too." She gave one last reassuring nod before heading to the door. The man walked her out, watching as she got into her car. For the first time in days, he felt confident that things would get better. Later that week, he received updates from the HOA. They issued a formal notice acknowledging what happened. They apologized for the woman's behavior, explaining that she had acted independently and wasn't authorized to speak or act on behalf of the HOA. She was temporarily restricted from attending community meetings, and her attempts to enforce rules were officially rejected. It didn't fix everything, but it was a step toward peace.